We couldn't be in the same room without trying to rip each other's throats out. Sometimes literally. That was me and Darren. Always had been, probably always would be. The training grounds smelled of damp earth and pine sap, the kind of air that stuck to your skin and made you feel alive. Wooden posts marked the edges of the arena, some splintered from years of claws, teeth, and egos hitting them at full speed. The wind carried the howl of wolves somewhere deep in the forest, a reminder that this wasn't just a sparring ring. It was home turf, and Darren stood dead center, arms crossed, looking like the cover model for Alpha Quarterly. Tall, broad shoulders, black hair that refused to be messy no matter how hard. The wind tried, and that face, handsome in the most irritating, perfect way. He didn't sweat. He didn't stumble. He didn't even breathe like a normal person. I hated him. Okay, maybe hate was a strong word. But whatever this magnetic throat-grabbing urge was, it was definitely mutual. Ready, princess? His voice carried easily over the noise, smooth as dark coffee and twice as bitter. Don't hold back, I shot back, rolling my shoulders. Oh wait. You never learned how? A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd circling the arena. Wolves loved bloodsport, even when it was verbal. Darren smirked, the corner of his mouth twitching upward like he couldn't quite help himself. And gods, that made it worse. We circled each other. The wet ground squelched beneath my boots, the scent of mud sharp in the cold air. Try not to cry when I win, he said casually, like we were discussing the weather. Try not to break a nail when you lose. I snapped back. He lunged first. It wasn't a friendly spar. It never was with us. We fought like two storms colliding, his strength against my speed, claws flashing when fists didn't land fast enough. The crowd whooped as we hit the ground, rolled, sprang back up. I got a hit in under his ribs. He caught my arm before I could land the second. For a split second we froze, too close, breathing hard. His eyes locked on mine. Dark, intense, infuriating. And then I jerked free, and aimed a kick at his knee. Cheap, he growled, catching my leg mid-air. Effective, I hissed back. The fight might have gone on until one of us dropped if a sharp whistle hadn't sliced through the air. Enough. Alpha Kalen's voice carried the weight of command. The crowd went dead silent. Great, we'd officially made it to the Alphas. You two are a pain in my tail list again. Darren straightened first, bowing his head respectfully. I muttered something under my breath, and pretended not to be catching my breath like I'd just run a marathon. Kalen eyed us like we were unruly pups instead of fully grown wolves, with jobs, responsibilities, and apparently zero impulse control. You two, he said slowly, are going on patrol tonight. Together. What? I blurted before I could stop myself. Darren didn't say anything, but I felt the smug radiating off him like heat from a fire. Kalen folded his arms. The western boundary. Reports of rogue activity. You leave in an hour. I opened my mouth to argue. One look from the Alpha shut it again. The crowd erupted in low chuckles. Someone, probably Jax, the pack's biggest gossip, said loudly. $5 says Remy kills him before the night's over. 10 says he doesn't make it past midnight, another voice chimed in. 20, on the Alpha Boy Scout snapping first, someone else added. My ears burned. Darren looked like he was enjoying this far too much. As the crowd dispersed, I grabbed my jacket and shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Wonderful, I muttered. My life is officially a thriller with the world's worst partner. Darren just smiled like the devil himself had taught him how. The forest always felt different at night. Quieter, wilder, like it was waiting for something with teeth to step out of the dark. Darren walked ahead of me, silent as ever, his long strides eating up the ground while I trailed behind, pretending the silence didn't bother me. It did. It always did. We'd left the training grounds an hour ago, crossed the river where the mist curled, like ghost fingers over the water, and now we were heading deep into the wild zone. No pack lights, no human roads, just the narrow twisting trails between black pines and the kind of darkness that made you wonder if your eyes were even open. I could hear his breathing. Slow, steady, controlled. Of course it was. The man probably had his entire life arranged in neat little mental folders labeled self-discipline and annoy Remy whenever possible. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, glaring at his back. "So," I said finally, because apparently my mouth hated silence as much as it hated him. "Are we just going to keep pretending we like each other now? Or is this going to be the usual mutually assured destruction routine?" He didn't even look at me. "I'm working." "Wow," I muttered. "Such personality. So much fun." The forest gave no answer. Just the wind rattling branches overhead, the occasional snap of something moving out there in the dark. My ears twitched, instincts sharpening. This wasn't our territory, and every wolf knew the wild zone had its own rules. We walked on. The air grew thicker, heavier, like the sky itself was lowering, pressing down on us. The first raindrop hit the bridge of my nose. I scowled. Great. Perfect camping weather. Darren finally glanced back. 1 second, maybe 2, just enough for me to see the flicker of irritation under his perfect calm. "Keep moving," he said. "Keep bossing," I shot back. But even as I said it, the storm rolled in fast, the wind tearing through the treetops, lightning flashing somewhere far off. The rain came hard and sudden, soaking through clothes, turning the ground to slick mud. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. We needed shelter. Even I knew that. Darren slowed near a cluster of boulders, scanning the trees with that annoyingly serious expression, before nodding toward a faint shape through the sheets of rain. A cabin. Or what was left of one. We pushed through the undergrowth, boots squelching in the mud, until the structure came into view. Leaning, one wall half collapsed, roof sagging like an old man's shoulders. The place smelled like wet wood and rust. It would have to do. Darren shoved the door open, the hinges screaming like they hadn't been touched in decades. Inside it was dark, damp, and smelled faintly of mold. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. A single cracked window let in thin gray light from the storm outside. "Cozy," I said dryly. Water dripping from my hair into my eyes. "Better than nothing," Darren answered, scanning the corners like something might leap out at us. I shook the water off like a half-drowned dog, then slumped against the nearest wall. The wood was cold and wet through my jacket. The rain drummed on the tin roof, a steady roar above us. We didn't talk. Not for a long time. Just sat there, listening to the storm. Finally, I broke first. Because of course I did. "You know," I said, voice echoing in the hollow space. "You're surprisingly good company when you're not talking, almost like a real human being." His eyes flicked toward me, cool and unreadable. "I trust your experience with silence is extensive." I gaped at him. "Did you just make a joke?" A faint smirk curved his mouth before he turned away, pretending to check the window. Unbelievable. I didn't know whether to be impressed or more annoyed. The wind howled around the cabin, making the walls shudder. Rain leaked through the roof in thin, steady drips. "Storm's getting worse," I said, mostly to fill the space. He didn't answer this time. Just stood near the door, shoulders straight, scanning the tree line like he expected trouble. It made sense. The wild zone wasn't exactly famous for friendly neighbors. Rogues sometimes slipped through here, half-feral wolves who'd abandoned their packs. And there were other things too. Things we didn't talk about. I watched him in the dim light. His posture was relaxed, but the tension was there, in the set of his jaw, the tightness in his grip on the doorframe. Like a bowstring pulled back, waiting to snap. He always looked like that around me. Maybe it was the storm, maybe it was just us. "Hey," I said finally. "You okay over there, Mr. Broody? You're staring into the dark like it owes you money." "Listening," he said simply. "To what? Creepy forest spirits?" "Movement," he corrected. "Upwind." I froze, instincts kicking in. The wind shifted through the cracked window, carrying scents of wet earth, pine, and something else. I didn't recognize it. For once, I didn't have a smart remark. Darren's shoulders stayed tense. His hand hovered near the knife on his belt. Outside, the storm swallowed everything. The wind, the The trees, the faint echoes of whatever had made that sound. We waited. Nothing came. Finally, Darren eased back, though the tightness in his frame didn't fade. "Probably a deer," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Maybe," he said. But he didn't look convinced. The storm raged on. Somewhere between the wind's howl and the rain's roar, I realized how small the cabin felt, how close the walls were, how loud his breathing sounded in the dim space. The air was heavy with wet earth and pine sap, and something else I didn't want to name. And for the first time all night, I wished the storm would end. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I wasn't sure what would happen if it didn't. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten worse, hammering the roof like it was trying to break through, seeping through the cracks in steady, cold streams. The air inside the cabin was thick, damp, clinging. It smelled of wet wood, earth, pine sap. And him, Darren, he stood near the door like some kind of silent sentinel, arms crossed, jaw set tight enough to crack. He hadn't moved in what felt like an hour. I told myself I didn't care, but something was wrong with him, or maybe with me, because my skin was too hot, my pulse uneven. The storm outside wasn't the only thing roaring. "Sit," I muttered finally, nodding toward the other side of the room. The space wasn't big, barely enough for the two of us to stand without bumping into each other. But there was a far corner. "You're making the place smaller by looming." Darren's eyes slid to mine. Dark. Focused. "Why?" His voice was low, almost flat. But there was something underneath. "Because," I snapped, "I don't need you staring holes through me all night. Sit down. Over there." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he crossed the room and leaned against the opposite wall as far as the cabin allowed. It wasn't far enough. The air was still heavy with him. I dragged my hands over my face, trying to will away the restless heat crawling under my skin. It wasn't just the storm or the wet clothes clinging to me. It was him. And that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. "This is ridiculous," I muttered under my breath. "What is?" His voice cut through the rain. I glared at him. "You. Me. This whole let's hate each other while stuck in a cabin thing." One corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. It made my stomach do something annoying. The storm howled through the cracks in the walls. Water dripped steadily near the door, forming a muddy puddle on the warped wooden floor. He shifted slightly, muscles tense, like he was holding himself too tightly. His eyes stayed on me, sharp, restless, unreadable. "What's your problem?" I snapped finally, heat prickling the back of my neck. He didn't answer right away. His gaze held mine for one long, thick moment before he said, "Nothing? Yeah. You look like the picture of nothing." I shot back. Silence. I hated silence. My pulse skittered under my skin, heat curling low in my chest. I shifted, restless, arms crossed tight like that would keep me in one piece. Then it hit me. That dizzy, buzzing hum under my skin. The restless energy scraping along my nerves. Oh, hell. Synchronization. It almost never happened. Most wolves went their whole lives without it. When cycles aligned omega heat and alpha drive, it was supposed to be rare. Legendary even. And here I was. Trapped in a storm. With him. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way my body reacted to the thought. I could feel his tension across the room, like a physical thing. He wasn't unaffected. I could see it in the rigid line of his shoulders, the way his hands curled into fists like he was hanging onto control by the thinnest thread. "Sit further," I said tightly. His brow arched. "Want me to wait outside? In the storm?" The words came out sharp before I could stop them. "Might help." His eyes darkened, not with anger exactly, but something close. The storm filled the space between us, the roar of rain, the groan of the wind tearing through the trees. And under it, the sound of our uneven breathing. I turned away, pacing the tiny stretch of floor. The air felt too hot, too close. My clothes stuck to my skin. Every nerve ending screamed awareness of him, of me, of the tiny distance between us. "Stop pacing," he said finally, voice tight. "Stop brooding," I snapped back. I turned too fast. My shoulder brushed his arm before I realized he'd moved closer without a sound. Just a touch, barely anything. But it was enough, like striking a match. Heat flared through me, fast and blinding, my breath catching before I could stop it. His eyes locked on mine, sharp and dark, and for a second neither of us moved. The storm outside roared. Inside, it was too quiet. "Don't," I said, though my voice cracked halfway. He didn't touch me again, but he didn't move back either. The air between us was alive, humming, charged like the air before lightning hits. I hated him. I hated that I didn't hate him enough. The storm outside had swallowed the world whole. Lightning cracked through the trees now and then, sharp flashes that lit the cabin in cold silver before plunging us back into darkness. Rain pounded the roof so hard it felt like the whole thing might cave in. The air was thick, humid, charged, suffocating, and somewhere between the thunder and the shadows, something inside me snapped. "Why are you like this?" I demanded, pacing again because standing still felt impossible. My voice came out harsher than I meant, cutting through the roar outside. Darren leaned against the wall like he was carved there, arms crossed, watching me with those steady dark eyes. Like the storm couldn't touch him. Like nothing ever did. "Like what?" he asked quietly. "Like you're made of ice and stone," and my words broke off because I couldn't name the thing clawing at my chest. "You don't feel anything, do you?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "You think that?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "I know that. Look at you, always perfect, always in control. It's infuriating." I meant it to sting. It didn't. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he said softly, "You think this is control?" I froze. The air between us shifted, heavier now, alive somehow. He pushed off the wall and crossed the tiny space in 2 strides. Close. Too close. I should have stepped back. I didn't. His eyes locked on mine. And for the first time since I'd known him, the mask slipped. There it was, the thing underneath. Heat. Want. Like the storm had gotten inside him too. My pulse stuttered. "This is what you wanted, right?" I snapped. Because my mouth always got there before my brain. "The big alpha routine? Fine. Congratulations. You win." He stared at me like I was something dangerous. Or maybe like he was. "Stop," he said roughly, voice low, strained. "You don't know what you're—" "Oh, spare me the lecture," I cut in, shoving at his chest because if I didn't touch him I might lose my mind. "You're not the only one with teeth here." That did it. He caught my wrist, not hard, but fast. Reflex. The storm cracked again, lighting us both in silver, and for one breathless second we were a tangle of shadows and heat and fury. I pushed back. He didn't let go. It wasn't a kiss. Not really. It was a collision, like we'd both been shoved off a cliff at the same time. The world went very, very quiet, except for my heartbeat slamming in my ears. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was too much. Like we were trying to win something even now. His hands braced on my shoulders, mine fisting in his shirt, both of us strung too tight to breathe. And then, he stopped. Just like that, his grip loosened. His head bowed, forehead against mine, breath ragged. "I can't," he muttered, voice cracking on the edges. I don't want to hurt you." Words sliced through the haze in my head. "Hurt me?" I stared at him, disoriented, the storm rattling the cabin walls around us. His hands had fallen to his sides like he didn't trust them anymore. Like he didn't trust himself. Something inside my chest twisted hard. "Darren," I said, and it came out softer than I meant. His eyes flicked to mine. Dark. Frantic. "I'm not like this," he said again, almost to himself. "I don't lose control. I don't—" I should have laughed. Should have thrown some sharp remark about his obsession with control. Instead, I heard myself say, "Now you can—" He went still. I swallowed hard, heat rising up my neck, my voice barely above the rain. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm not afraid of you." Something broke in his face then, like the storm outside had cracked straight through him. He touched me again, but different this time. Careful. Like I was something he might ruin if he wasn't gentle enough. And somehow, that undoing was worse than any fight we'd ever had. I didn't remember moving, but suddenly we were close again, breathing the same air, the world narrowing to heat and rain and the sound of my own pulse. The storm raged, lightning flaring through the window, shadows leaping across the walls. It wasn't a battle anymore. It wasn't even about winning. It was about falling. Every touch burned, but not in the way I feared. It wasn't pain. It was everything else, too much and not enough all at once. I didn't know when my hands stopped pushing and started holding. When his stopped holding back at all. The cabin felt too small, the air too thin, like the storm had stolen all the oxygen and left only him. When it finally slowed, when the desperate edge bled into something quieter, I realized my hands were trembling. So were his. He pulled back just enough to look at me, chest rising and falling like he'd run miles through the rain. "This isn't," he started, then stopped like the words hurt. I almost told him to shut up, that I didn't care. But the way he looked at me, like I was something fragile, breakable, stole the words from my mouth. The storm outside went on, lightning cutting the sky to pieces. Inside, for the first time all night, neither of us moved. Not because we were afraid, but because something had shifted, and we both knew it. Morning came gray and bitter, the kind of cold that crawled straight into your bones. The rain had finally stopped some time before dawn, but the world outside the cabin was still dripping. Water clung to every leaf, slid down the black bark of trees, pooled in muddy footprints that led nowhere. A heavy mist wound through the forest like it had been waiting all night for its turn to haunt the place. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching it breathe between the pines. The cabin behind me was silent. He hadn't said a word since last night. I wasn't going to be the first. The boards creaked as Darren stepped out, boots sinking into the wet ground. He didn't look at me. Not once. His face was calm, distant, like the storm had washed him clean of anything human. And that, somehow, hurt worse than any fight we'd ever had. "So," I said finally, because the quiet was unbearable. "We're back to strangers now? That it?" His jaw tightened. "Barely. We have a job to finish." "Oh," I snapped, the sarcasm cutting sharper than I meant. "Great. Mission first, right? Wouldn't want anything messy like feelings getting in the way." That got me a flicker of his eyes. Dark, unreadable. Then nothing. I laughed, sharp and empty. "Right. Back to enemies then. Easier that way." The mist rolled thicker through the trees, swallowing the edges of the world. The forest smelled of wet soil, crushed leaves and the faint copper tang of wolves somewhere far off. He started walking without waiting for me. Fine. Two could play the silent game. I fell into step behind him, boots sinking into the damp earth, the chill biting through my jacket. Every breath turned white in the cold air. My thoughts were louder than the wind. What did I expect? That one night would fix years of biting each other's throats? That the storm had changed anything except the weather? Stupid. He moved like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't kissed me like the world was ending. Like he hadn't stopped halfway through like it was a mistake. My chest ached in places I didn't want to name. Behind his calm shoulders, I bit down on every word trying to claw its way out of my throat. "You kissed me like you meant it. You stopped like you didn't." The trail narrowed where the pines grew thicker, their branches dripping cold water on our heads. He didn't so much as flinch. Typical Darren. Stormproof. Bulletproof. Feelingsproof. Except, last night. Last night for a moment, he hadn't been any of those things. I hated how much I wanted that version of him back. He paused at a ridge where the fog poured like a river between the trees, scanning the forest below. His shoulders were tight, fists clenched at his sides. He thought I couldn't see it. Maybe he thought a lot of things. In his head, I was probably the fragile one. The one who needed protecting. The one he might have hurt. He couldn't be more wrong. Because the only thing that actually hurt was this, his silence. I shoved my hands into my pockets, teeth gritted. "You know," I said, voice too bright, Most people at least talk after something like that. He didn't look at me. Nothing to talk about. Ice water. Right to the chest. Right, I said flatly. Of course. Nothing happened. My mistake. His head turned slightly, like he wanted to say something, but the words never came. Figures. The wind carried the distant call of a raven through the trees. The sun tried and failed to burn through the clouds. My boots squelched in the mud with every step. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it hadn't meant anything anyway. But the words stuck like wet leaves in my throat. The truth was worse. Because while I thought he was regretting me, he was probably out here thinking he'd broken something fragile. That he'd been too much. And neither of us was brave enough to say the obvious. That the only thing cracked wide open was the space between us. The camp came into view just as the sun finally tore through the fog, splintering across the clearing in pale gold. Smoke curled from the fire pit at the center, carrying the smell of wood ash and roasting meat. Wolves moved between tents and lean-tos, voices rising in easy laughter, the ordinary rhythm of pack life wrapping around the edges of the clearing like a familiar song. We'd barely stepped out of the tree line before someone spotted us. "Well, well," Jax called from near the fire, a grin spreading across his face. "Look who crawled back in one piece." A few heads turned. Then more. "Great. Thought for sure," another voice piped up. "The big bad alpha would have eaten him alive by midnight." The laughter rolled through the camp like thunder. I didn't even have time to open my mouth before someone added, "So, Remy, did you make it out with all your limbs? Or should we start a search party for what's left?" My ears burned. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I gave an exaggerated bow. Hilarious, truly. "Don't quit your day jobs, comedians." The pack chuckled louder, like sharks smelling blood. Wolves loved two things, gossip and drama. We just delivered both wrapped in a neat little package. I was halfway to snapping something else when Darren's voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Quiet. Immediate. He didn't raise his tone. Didn't have to. Half the pack froze mid-smirk. Darren had that effect on people. Calm. Controlled. Deadly serious. And right now, standing next to me with his shoulders squared and eyes hard, he radiated, "Do not push this." I blinked, thrown for half a second. He never interfered before. Not for me. The tension cracked when Jax held up his hands, grinning like he'd been waiting for this all morning. All right. We're just saying, it's not every day you two share a tent without claws involved." "Cabin," I muttered. "And plenty of claws." The pack howled at that, delighted. I regretted opening my mouth immediately. Darren shot me a look. Not angry. Just unreadable. We walked past the fire toward the supply tent. Conversations picked up again, though not without a few curious glances following us. I could feel it. The shift. The way people watched us now, like the edges didn't fit the same way they used to, like they could smell the difference even if they didn't understand it yet. And maybe they weren't wrong. I dumped my gear near the tent, trying to shake off the heat crawling up my neck. "So," I said dryly, "you planning to glare the whole pack into silence, or just my friends?" "Both," Darren said simply, checking the straps on his pack. I snorted. Wow. Protective and terrifying. "Be still, my heart." He didn't answer, but his mouth twitched like he was holding back a smile. Great. So now he had humor too. The pack wasn't subtle. I could hear the whispers already, half amusement, half confusion. Wolves didn't miss much, especially not changes in behavior. Last week, Darren and I couldn't be in the same clearing without trying to kill each other. This week, well, he hadn't let anyone touch me with words sharper than a joke, and I didn't hate it as much as I should have. By midday the training grounds were packed. Wolves leaned against the railings, sat on fence posts, or sprawled out in the grass, watching the chaos unfold in the center arena. The chaos, of course, was us. Darren and I moved like we'd been doing this for years instead of, well, not at all. He blocked high, I swept low. He drove forward, I slipped around to his blind side. We didn't have to talk, didn't even have to look. Somehow, We just knew where the other one would be. It was unsettling and kind of incredible. Is anyone else seeing this? Someone muttered from the sidelines. Yeah, Jack said. I thought they hated each other. They do, another voice answered. Pretty sure this is foreplay. I pretended not to hear that. We finished the round with a clean, brutal takedown, Darren pinning our mock opponent while I swept the weapon out of reach. The crowd actually cheered. I staggered back, sweat sticking my shirt to my spine, grinning despite myself. Darren straightened slowly, glancing at me under the shadow of his hair. Not bad, he said. Not bad? I scoffed. We were perfect. The corner of his mouth almost curved. Almost. From the sidelines, Jack shouted, "So which one of you is in charge here?" I opened my mouth. Darren opened his at the same time. Me, we said in unison. Then both of us turned to glare at each other. I crossed my arms. Dream on, Alpha. He arched a brow. Fact. Omega. Oh, that's cute, I shot back. You think you're the boss just because you're taller? Stronger, he said evenly. Wrong, I snapped. You're just heavier, like a tree. A very broody, boring tree. The pack was loving this. Half of them were laughing, the other half clearly taking bets on whether we'd start kissing or killing each other first. Darren didn't rise to the bait this time. He just shook his head like I was exhausting in ways he couldn't begin to describe. We ran the drill again. And again. The rhythm settled into something smooth, instinctive. Like fighting with him had flipped some hidden switch inside me. One I didn't even know was there. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the packed dirt. Sweat trickled between my shoulder blades. My lungs burned. Finally, Kalen called the session. The crowd began to scatter, some still throwing curious glances our way. I grabbed my water flask and flopped onto the edge of the fence, watching Darren run a hand through his sweat-damp hair. He looked tired, not physically, something else. Before I could stop myself, I said, "Okay. What's with you?" He glanced over. "What?" "You look like someone stole your favorite sword," I said. One brow ticked upward. "I don't have a favorite sword." "Wow. Tragic. No wonder you're so grumpy." His mouth twitched, but then the almost smile faded. He leaned against the fence beside me, silent for a long moment. Finally he said, "I was afraid." That caught me off guard. Of what? My devastating charm? His eyes slid to mine. Serious. Of losing control. The words hung between us like the echo of thunder. He looked away, jaw tight. "I didn't want to hurt you." That night, something in my chest shifted. Because here was the thing. I'd been so sure he regretted it. That he regretted me. I stared at the dirt for a long moment, then said quietly, "I was afraid too." His head turned slightly, listening. "That you'd push me away," I admitted. Like it didn't mean anything. Silence. Except for the wind, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the cook fires. Darren's hands flexed on the railing. I swallowed hard. The heat between my ribs wasn't anger this time. It wasn't even frustration. It was something warmer, steadier, creeping in slow like sunlight after a long storm. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and muttered, "Great. Now what? We start writing each other love letters?" Darren actually smiled then, small, faint, but real. "Dream on, Omega." I rolled my eyes, hiding the fact that my chest felt dangerously light. The pack was still watching us from a distance, probably cooking up a week's worth of gossip already. Let them. For once, I didn't care. By the time the sun bled out behind the tree line, the whole camp glowed with firelight. The pack gathered around the main pit, voices rolling like warm thunder, the smell of wood smoke, and roasting meat wrapping the clearing in something almost too close to peace. Sparks climbed into the dark sky above us, carrying with them the crackle of laughter, the easy rhythm of family. It had been a long time since I'd seen the pack like this, relaxed, open. No drills, no border patrols, no biting commentary about me and Darren. Well, not no commentary. So, Jax announced as he sauntered past with a mug of something steaming. Do we call you two the dynamic duo now, or should we keep betting on who kills the other first? The crowd chuckled. I made a show of glaring. Careful. I know where you sleep. Yeah, next to Captain Broody there? Jax grinned and dodged the pine cone I lobbed at his head. Across the fire, Darren sat with his usual unshakable calm, elbows on his knees, watching the flames throw gold across the clearing. He hadn't denied anything yet, hadn't growled or snarled or told them all to shut up, which of course, the pack noticed immediately. Kaelin rose finally, lifting a hand for quiet. The chatter dimmed. We've all seen it, the Alpha said, voice carrying through the night. You fight together, you train together, you bleed together. He paused, eyes sweeping the circle, then landing on me. On Darren. You're a team now. On and off the field. The cheer that followed nearly shook the trees. I blinked, heat crawling up my neck despite the cool evening air. Someone shouted, "So who's in charge then?" "Me," Darren said at the exact same time I said "me." The pack howled with laughter. I crossed my arms, glaring at him. "Dream on, Alpha." He didn't even look at me when he said, "Fact, Omega." "Wrong," I shot back instantly. "You're just louder, stronger," he returned, deadpan. "Delusional," I snapped. The pack roared, eating up every word like it was dessert after a feast. Even Kaelin's mouth twitched like he was holding back a grin. The fire popped, sparks spinning upward. Someone passed mugs around, someone else started a low song on a battered guitar. Wolves leaned shoulder to shoulder, voices rising again. The tension of the last week finally bleeding out into something softer. I sat eventually, the heat of the flames soaking into my skin, the night air cool on the back of my neck. Darren dropped down beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. It felt strange, and maybe a little too easy, like the storm and the silence. And the fights had all been leading here, whether we wanted it or not. The fire threw gold across his face, catching on the sharp line of his jaw, the faint smudge of dirt across his cheek. He looked different in this light. Younger, almost. "You're quiet," I muttered finally. "I'm listening," he said. "To what?" He tipped his head toward the pack's laughter, the crackle of the fire, the wind through the trees. This, for some reason, that twisted something warm in my chest. I covered it instantly with sarcasm. "Careful. You'll ruin your reputation if you start getting sentimental." He glanced at me, the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. I looked back at the fire before anyone noticed my ears turning red. After a long pause I muttered, "It's not love. Just convenience." The words came out sharp, defensive, like I had to throw them first before he did. Darren didn't even blink. "Lie," he said softly, eyes still on the flames. "And you know it." My chest went warm all over again. The pack laughed at another joke somewhere across the fire. Sparks leapt into the night. Someone passed me a mug, and I took it mostly so I'd have an excuse not to answer right away. Convenience. Sure, maybe if I said it enough times, I'd believe it. But with the firelight painting everything gold, and the pack singing off-key somewhere behind us, with his shoulder steady and warm against mine, the lie tasted thin as smoke on my tongue. For the first time in longer than I could remember, the night didn't feel cold at all.